You're in a moment of closeness. The lights are low, the rhythm is familiar, and the space between you has been shared for years. Everything feels natural, comfortable, safe, and then she says something, just a phrase, a tone, a choice of words that doesn't quite fit. Not shocking, not extreme, just different. And for a fraction of a second, you feel it. A subtle tightening in your chest, a flicker of unease. Most men don't get blindsided because they're careless. They get blindsided because they miss the subtle shifts that appear long before any obvious signs. These shifts rarely show up in texts, late-night calls, or schedules. They appear in the quiet, unguarded moments, when her body is near yours, but her mind might not be. Language during intimacy is one of the least filtered forms of communication. The words she chooses, the pauses, the corrections, even the phrasing that feels rehearsed, all of it carries meaning. These micro shifts are signals, small but powerful, and if ignored, they can quietly reshape the dynamics of a relationship. Tonight, we're going to look closely at 6 phrases that reveal more than she might realize. You don't need to panic if you've heard one of them. One phrase isn't proof, but awareness is key. The man who notices patterns before they escalate holds the advantage. The one who dismisses these cues often only sees the consequences too late. By the end of this discussion, you'll understand how language acts as an early warning system, how subtle verbal cues can reveal her true mental and emotional state, and why paying attention to these small shifts can protect both your heart and your relationship. So stay focused, stay observant, and let's start by uncovering the first phrase that can signal a change you might not have noticed before. At first, this phrase may seem harmless, even flattering. She's guiding you, sharing preferences, helping you understand what feels best. And in many relationships, gradual exploration is natural. Couples experiment together, discover new layers, and refine intimacy over time. But there's a difference between organic discovery and sudden precision that appears out of nowhere. When she says, "Do it like that again," with clarity, confidence, and exact detail, pause. Ask yourself, has this specificity always existed, or is it new? Intimacy is a learned rhythm, built over months and years. If suddenly she's instructing you in a way she never has before, it may not be spontaneous growth. It may be a template learned elsewhere. Psychologically, the human brain encodes pleasure as memory. When a specific action produces strong emotional and physical responses, the brain links that sensation to the person delivering it. When language during intimacy suddenly becomes precise, it's often a reflection of those memory patterns. In other words, the specificity isn't random. It carries fingerprints of prior experiences. Now, this doesn't mean she is unfaithful. Sometimes it is simply a new level of self-awareness or confidence. The key difference is how it feels: collaborative versus instructive. Growth in intimacy feels mutual. Exploration is a shared journey. Coaching that feels rehearsed, sharp, or predetermined can indicate she has already formed this ideal scenario elsewhere. Here's the takeaway. Notice the shift. Not the fact she has preferences, that's normal, but the sudden emergence of precision that didn't exist before. That shift is a signal. It tells you her internal reference point may have expanded beyond your shared experiences. Most men dismiss it, choosing comforting explanations over confronting possibilities. Awareness doesn't mean suspicion. It means observing patterns calmly, without panic. If something feels rehearsed, pay attention, not just to the words, but to the context, the timing, and the consistency of these instructions. This is the first phrase that can quietly reveal a shift in her internal map of intimacy. Recognizing it early allows you to stay aware, respond thoughtfully, and protect your relationship before small cracks become patterns. On the surface, this phrase feels flattering. Your chest swells. You feel unique, chosen, exceptional, the man who unlocked something no one else ever could. It appeals directly to ego, and most men take it at face value. But beneath the surface, there's a subtle psychological layer you need to understand. In psychology, cognitive dissonance describes the tension people feel when their actions don't align with their self-image. If she's involved emotionally or physically elsewhere while sharing intimacy with you, her mind works hard to reconcile that contradiction. One of the easiest ways to reduce that tension is to rewrite the narrative in real time. By insisting, "Nobody's ever done this to me before," she reassures herself that this moment is exclusive, even if it isn't. Here's the critical insight. When someone emphasizes uniqueness without being asked, it's rarely random. Overemphasis is often a cover for instability. The more loudly or dramatically she proclaims exclusivity, the more likely she's compensating for something uncertain. Timing matters too. Has she ever said this before in similar intimate moments? Or is it suddenly appearing almost theatrically, as if it's part of a script? Patterns matter more than single instances. Look for consistency, intensity, and context. These are the signals of whether the praise is authentic or protective. The phrase itself isn't proof of betrayal. One sentence doesn't confirm anything. But when you notice repeated statements of uniqueness, especially paired with other subtle behavioral shifts, new energy, secrecy, comparisons, or sudden novelty, you need to pay attention. The louder the insistence on being special, the more it's worth observing who or what she may be trying to mentally overwrite. In short, this is a moment to step back, watch, and note patterns. Flattery isn't always innocent. When declarations of uniqueness feel rehearsed, they may be less about you and more about her managing internal conflict. Awareness here is not control. It's understanding the signals before they become patterns that could affect your relationship. At first, the phrase, "you feel different," might seem harmless, even intriguing. It feels like curiosity, a compliment, or a subtle observation. But if you pause and examine it carefully, the meaning can be far deeper. The word different is never random. The human brain cannot label something as different without a reference point, something to compare against. Comparison requires two experiences. If you are the only man in her world, you are the baseline. So when she suddenly says you feel different, it often signals that her mind is running a parallel evaluation. Someone else has created the contrast she's measuring against. This isn't about paranoia or assuming the worst. It's about understanding cognitive processing. Our brains naturally compare repeated experiences, especially physical ones. When she comments on difference during intimacy, when nothing in your behavior or energy has changed significantly, her mind may be subconsciously drawing a comparison to someone recent. Pay attention to subtle cues that accompany this statement. A pause, a quick microcorrection, and "I don't know, just different," followed by a shift in conversation. These small behaviors often indicate she caught herself before fully articulating the comparison. It's important to note that one offhand comment does not confirm anything. But if difference starts appearing spontaneously, repeatedly, or after periods where she's been distant, unusually energized, or secretive, it's a signal worth noticing. Patterns are more telling than isolated moments. The key takeaway is simple. Language during intimacy is one of the least filtered ways someone communicates. When words like different appear, they are not just observations, they are subtle signs of internal contrast. Awareness of these signals allows you to read the dynamics of the relationship clearly without overreacting or misjudging. In short, when comparison language surfaces unexpectedly, it's not just about your behavior, it's about who else may be influencing her internal reference points. Recognizing this early gives you the advantage of understanding shifts before they become patterns. On the surface, starting a sentence with "this reminds me of" may seem innocent, a memory, a shared experience, or a fleeting thought. But in moments of intimacy, when minds and bodies are fully present, this phrase can reveal something deeper: mental crossover. When a woman is completely engaged, emotionally, physically, and mentally, her thoughts rarely drift to unrelated experiences. But the brain isn't perfectly compartmentalized, especially when someone is maintaining two emotional or physical connections. Psychologists call this compartmentalization breakdown. When intense physical or emotional sensations trigger memories, the mind may unintentionally pull experiences from another context into the present moment. Watch for subtle signs. Does she trail off mid-sentence? Does the thought remain incomplete? Or does she quickly shift the topic? This isn't forgetfulness. It's self-censorship. A memory from another relationship or experience may have been triggered, but she's actively keeping it out of the current moment. Even a brief pause can be louder than words. The critical insight is that mental presence is as important as physical presence. Someone may be physically engaged, but if her attention drifts, even for a split second, to someone else, it signals that part of her mind is divided. These small intrusions often go unnoticed, but they can reveal who or what occupies her thoughts during intimacy. Notice the patterns: unfinished thoughts, subtle associations, eye movements, or micropauses. When these appear repeatedly, they're not random. They're a window into how her mental and emotional attention is allocated. Remember, this isn't about accusations or paranoia. It's about observing patterns calmly. Awareness allows you to detect subtle shifts in focus and emotional alignment before they affect the relationship. Presence is earned, nurtured, and maintained. When attention is divided, the first cracks often appear in language, not in actions. By recognizing these small verbal and nonverbal cues, you gain insight into the true dynamics of intimacy and connection. It's about understanding where her mind is in the moment, not controlling her. At first, this phrase can feel exciting. Curiosity, growth, and exploration are natural in a healthy relationship. Trying new things together, new positions, playful experiments, or emotional adventures can strengthen intimacy and connection. But context matters, and sudden novelty without explanation can be a subtle signal worth observing. Healthy exploration usually evolves gradually. It starts with conversations, curiosity, and shared excitement. Both partners build anticipation, experiment together, and adjust over time. But when new desires appear almost overnight, new techniques, new intensity, or unexpected rules, especially alongside behavioral changes outside the bedroom, it's worth paying attention. Observe her broader patterns. Has she become more secretive with her phone? Is she suddenly protective of her personal time or space? Are new routines or habits appearing that don't align with the shared rhythm you've built over the years? Individually, each change might seem minor. Together, they can form a pattern that signals external influence or contrast experiences. Psychologically, intense new experiences, especially from past encounters, create strong emotional and physical impressions. Once the brain learns new sensations, it can be difficult to compartmentalize. Sometimes these experiences blend subtly into existing relationships, not out of malice, but because the body and mind are responding to novelty and dopamine spikes. The key difference lies in timing and integration. Growth in intimacy feels collaborative, mutual, and natural. Abrupt, isolated novelty that appears alongside secrecy or behavioral shifts may indicate that these experiences have been influenced by external reference points. The pattern is what matters, not just the act itself. Awareness is your tool here. One request to try something new is not a warning sign, but sudden, repeated spikes of novelty, paired with other subtle changes in behavior, warrant observation. Ask yourself, is this growth a shared discovery, or does it feel imported, rehearsed, or specific to sensations she's already encountered elsewhere? Understanding this distinction allows you to engage thoughtfully, protect your emotional investment, and maintain clarity about the dynamics of your relationship. Awareness is not suspicion, it's insight. Recognizing these cues early helps prevent small cracks from evolving into significant shifts. This phrase can feel intimate, intense, even cinematic. Names anchor identity. In a healthy, long-term relationship, verbal reminders aren't usually necessary. Emotional and physical presence alone provide connection. So when a partner suddenly insists, "Say my name," or emphasizes yours with unusual intensity, it's worth paying close attention. Psychologically, this is often a grounding mechanism. If part of her mind is occupied elsewhere, or if she's juggling multiple emotional realities, the brain may overcompensate to keep attention anchored in the present relationship. Repeating names reinforces identity and presence, reminding her where she is, both physically and mentally. Consider the context. Have names been a natural part of your intimacy before, Or is this a new, repeated behavior? Sudden insistence on verbal anchoring often coincides with experiences that feel familiar from outside the relationship. It's a subtle form of containment, preventing accidental mental or emotional crossover. Notice tone, timing, and frequency. Does it feel organic or deliberate and precise? Is it linked to certain positions, intensity, or scenarios that mirror past experiences? Grounding is a protective mechanism. When the mind needs constant reassurance of the present connection, it signals that mental boundaries are being tested. This isn't about assuming the worst. It's about observing patterns. Fully loyal and present partners don't need verbal anchors. Presence is effortless. But when part of her attention drifts, grounding becomes necessary. By recognizing this subtle cue, you gain insight into where her mind truly is during intimate moments without overreacting or controlling the situation. The takeaway is clear. When names become critical during intimacy, it may indicate a need to maintain focus because the internal boundaries are blurred. Awareness allows you to protect your emotional investment, maintain clarity, and respond thoughtfully. Presence and attention are just as important as physical connection, and noticing these verbal cues gives you an early understanding of the dynamics in play. Now that we've explored 6 subtle phrases, each with hidden meaning, it's time to step back and see the bigger picture. One phrase alone doesn't confirm anything. Patterns do. When these language shifts appear repeatedly, alongside subtle behavioral changes, they form a clear signal of internal shifts. The key is observation without paranoia. Watch for precision in instructions that didn't exist before, overemphasized uniqueness or compliments, unexpected comparisons, intrusive memories or incomplete thoughts, sudden novelty paired with secrecy or changes in routine, names used as anchors rather than natural expressions of passion. Each of these individually may seem harmless. Together, they reveal whether attention, intention, or emotional focus is shifting. Awareness doesn't mean controlling her actions or questioning every word. It's about reading patterns calmly and clearly, understanding context, and trusting your instincts. The earlier you recognize these signals, the sooner you can address changes before they escalate into larger issues. Another crucial point: presence matters as much as behavior. Physical intimacy is only part of the connection. Mental and emotional engagement drives the depth of the relationship. If language signals divided attention, the foundation may already be shifting, even if external behaviors seem unchanged. Finally, remember the principle behind all these observations. Power in a relationship comes from awareness, not dominance. When you notice patterns early, you don't scramble, panic, or compete with unseen influences. You make informed, confident decisions. Recognizing these subtle verbal and behavioral shifts allows you to maintain clarity, protect your emotional investment, and navigate intimacy with insight rather than assumption. Observation, not obsession, is the key to understanding and maintaining the integrity of your relationship. 9. Conclusion. Call to action. We've explored 6 subtle language shifts that can reveal more than she may consciously realize. Do it like that again. Sudden precision may signal external reference points. Nobody's ever done this to me before. Overemphasis can indicate subconscious rewriting of experiences. You feel different. Comparison implies someone else is in her mental frame. This reminds me of incomplete thoughts reveal mental crossover or divided attention. I want to try something new. Abrupt novelty paired with behavioral shifts can signal external influence. Say my name. Grounding language may indicate blurred mental boundaries. One phrase alone is rarely proof of anything, but patterns are revealing. Paying attention to these cues allows you to read the subtle dynamics of intimacy and emotional focus, giving you clarity without suspicion or paranoia. Awareness is the real power in any relationship. It lets you observe shifts calmly, notice when attention is divided, and respond thoughtfully instead of reacting emotionally. You don't need to control or interrogate. You simply need to see the patterns, understand the signals, and trust your instincts. If this discussion opened your eyes to subtle shifts you've sensed but couldn't explain, take action. Stay observant, reflect on patterns, and protect your emotional well-being. Share this with someone who trusts words too easily. And remember, the man who reads patterns calmly is never blindsided. Awareness, not dominance, keeps relationships grounded, honest, and secure.